You've made no progress then since February. Is that
in terms of? Well, we
Well,
had to.
what if-
I
I
mean,
don't know,
I mean, look,
anything.
I would refer you to Di Mastor to talk about the political process in Geneva. He says there was progress.
Can we go back to Syria?
Okay.
Yesterday you said the violence had continued to decline despite some violations to the cessation of hostilities. We're now up to 161 dead, and these are just in the Islamic State attacks. There was violence in the eastern Ghouta and in Daraya. There was also some violence in the north. That seems to belie your argument that the violence has declined. What does that say about the state of your cessation of hostilities, as you call it?
Well, I certainly wasn't trying to give the impression yesterday that everything was hunky-dory in terms of the cessation of hostility. To the contrary. No, but let me finish.
Well,
to the contrary.
I didn't say that.
To the contrary. Well, you said that. Look, I mean,
you said that there was a decline in violence. That has nothing to do with hunky-dory.
I was speaking. First of all, I was speaking more broadly about since the cessation of hostilities came into effect in late February, we have seen a significant decline in violence. That said, as we've admitted or recognized over the past several weeks, there's been a deterioration in different parts of Syria, most certainly around Damascus and some of the suburbs there, but certainly around Aleppo. Yesterday, we did see these horrific attacks on the towns of Jabla and also in the port city of Tartus. And Daesh claimed responsibility for those. We condemn them strongly. But let's separate those attacks, if I can do so, to the broader issue of the cessation of hostilities and whether it's holding or not around Syria.
So how much has the violence gone down, according to this measure of significant that you keep giving us?
Overall, look, I don't know if I can put a percentage figure on it. I think at some point we were saying 70 to 80%, but that's probably slid backwards. Nationwide, of course. And again, these are estimates, and we acknowledge that.
Last week, the Minister estimated down 50% from before.
That's probably somewhat accurate, as I
So
said,
the
given
trend
the
is
fact that
upwards.
there's been backsliding on many parts of it.
So you accept that the trend is upwards. It dropped 90% after you declared the ceasefire, then you admitted that it only dropped 70%, and then now you're saying it only
I
dropped
guess,
50%.
David, and again, if I'm not being clear, I mean, I acknowledge, and everyone acknowledges the fact that, you know, the initial cessation of hostilities was moderately to fairly successful. Significant reduction allowed us to get humanitarian access to some of the besieged areas, but not all. But then we saw that deteriorate. Certainly there were pockets of fighting. We had this reaffirmation that seemed to take hold in some parts. Then we had the ISSG meeting.
I'd like to replace the E on deteriorating with an ING. It's deteriorating. It continues to deteriorate.
Sure. Look, I'm not.
That's the only quibble.
Yes.
You've
Okay.
implied that it got a bit worse.
Fair enough. And look, this all hinges, and we've said this before, on Russia's ability to exert that influence on Assad. If they choose not to, or if they're unable to, this whole thing falls apart.
It's been 3+ months now
Yep.
that you've been trying with these various cessation of hostilities mechanisms. And yesterday, for example, we could have easily seen, let's say, 200 dead. That's probably underselling it by a lot. What does that say? Where are you? It's 3 months, and you can't even. There's a day when it's as high as it's just about ever been.
Well, Brad, again, no one was trying to.
That's 70,000 extrapolated over a year.
No one
that's
said.
a lot.
I understand that, Brad, and as imperfect as the cessation of hostilities is, it's still better than what preceded it. But
where are we in the process? In the process, we're now back to trying to get a nationwide cessation of hostilities.
So our efforts continue to solidify and reinstate the cessation of hostilities, and with an eye towards getting the parties back to Geneva.
But this is what you thought you had in February, and which you actually thought you had in last autumn, if I'm not mistaken. November, sorry.
Right. But arguably we did have one, and all imperfect as it was, again, we can quibble over this, in February, that lasted a good length of time, and then we saw backsliding, without a doubt.
You've made no progress then since February. Is that
In terms of, Well, we
Well,
had
what
the.
if- I
I
don't
mean,
know, anything.
I would refer you to Demastor to talk about the political process in Geneva. He says there was progress made, that they moved beyond just simply talking about the logistics into what, at least an agreement to talk about the issues behind it. Now, as he said, those proximity talks were ended, and now there's an effort to get them back to Geneva. And frankly, and we've said this, the current environment on the ground with the cessation barely holding in some places doesn't help that.